Hello there, YouTube. This is Mr. Gibson Guy. Thanks for stopping by today. I'm going to do something today. Put my glasses on. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a camera that I've had floating around here for a while. I haven't really done too much with it, and it's one of those cameras which doesn't get a lot of attention, but I wanted to bring this to light and feature this camera today, because this is a real sleeper of a film camera. If you're looking for getting a film camera that gets you into some good lenses and doing some great picture taking, this is, and you'd want to do it on a budget, I got just the budget stuff for you. Nikon, was an optical company, and it was really in the late 40s after World War II when the U.S. government people that were kind of trying to get them back off of a war footing and get the country to join the regular civilized nations of the world. And they encouraged Japan, different companies, to go into different manufacturing positions. And one of the things that they did was they encouraged Nikon, instead of just making lenses and glass, to start with their own cameras. And not be off the subject here. They jumped in copying the Contax 3A and 2A with their own kind of version of it. This was the Nikon S2, one of their early models, and this is a rangefinder camera. And so in the late 40s and into the 50s, Nikon made these, and these cameras got to be very, very popular. And Nikon said, hey, we're doing pretty good in the camera business. And that was the first step. And beyond that, they said, well, Nikon's got to move up to the newest thing, which would be a single lens reflex. And so they started designing a single lens reflex, and they first in 1959 released the Nikon F, which was their professional big heavy camera. And then there was a lot of call for joining in the lower end of the market and with consumer cameras. And so Nikon decided to protect their brand, in America anyway, and they came up with a sort of a Nikon name for their consumer level mass production cameras, meaning they called those cameras the Nikomat. Actually the Nikomat camera, Nikomat was the consumer line of cameras made in Japan for the US market. They called them Nikomats. Then they made some that they were also Nikomats, but for other markets outside of the U.S. And these they called the Nikomat. So they changed a couple of letters around, and here's a Nikomat for you. This is the one that we're going to be looking at today. We see a lot of today when you're looking around at old cameras, a Nikomat FT or FTN or various variations on those. Those were the all metal and glass, all mechanical, 35 millimeter single lens reflex cameras for the consumer market. Of course, the Fs, later F2s, those were all considered for professionals, and those were real high-grade cameras. But all through the 60s, they did Nikomats, and then which were the FT series, the all mechanical ones. And then in 1972, things started to change, and Nikon was kind of getting into the electronic camera market. Electronic camera meaning that cameras that had a more advanced light meter that needed a battery to power it, that had circuitry in it to determine automatic exposure based on the light that comes through the lens, and to time the shutter, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And so they came out with the EL series, and they called it a Nikomat because this was aimed as a consumer camera, not as a professional camera, although it is very capable of being a professional camera. It just doesn't have a removable finder and all the modularity that the F and F2 would eventually have. So this came out at the same time as the F2, the first time the F was upgraded after 11 years. But these cameras are really great because this thing is dated back in 1972, and it's a tank, and it runs like a tank. Everything is perfect on this camera. I've checked everything out, had to put a battery in it. I'll talk to you about the battery and everything. But nowadays, this is one of these great things. If you want to get an old Nikon F, it's going to be way over $100 at least. It's going to be very old and worn down and a lot of chipped up and taking a lot of hard knocks, and it's probably still going to keep going. But a camera like this, you can get automatic exposure, or you can do metered manual with it, and it will give you a more modern day classic film camera that you can use for a lot of stuff, and it'll really stand up to a lot of abuse. And it just takes a battery, which we'll talk about. So let me go through just the features of the EL here. The EL was the first Nikon with electronically controlled shutter speeds, had aperture priority, and automatic exposure, and full metered manual, and even has an exposure lock. One thing that they didn't put on this electronic auto exposure was such a new thing that they were not even thinking of these things yet. But over on the left-hand side, they didn't put in an exposure compensation dial. But you can do exposure compensation. You just pull this little lever here, and you can you do it there. You push that, and then this dial will go around, so you can, if you were set on 200 speed film, your ASA, and you wanted to go one stop under, you could set it to ASA 400, or if you want to go one stop over, you can set it to ASA 100. Just remember to reset the ASA settings after you do that to correct it. Or you can use the exposure lock, and you can move right in on what your subject is, press that lock in right there, and then come back and take your picture, and it'll give you the correct exposure for what you wanted when you push that button down. And then you just take a picture with it. Oh, I have it wound. Oh, let's see. Oh, that's shutter. That's automatic exposure. It sounded like a 1 second exposure to me. We'll see about that in a minute. All right, so the meter built into the camera uses CDS cells and was 60% center weighted. Now, this sounds like just plain old stuff, but at the time that Nikon was doing this, they were doing all the engineering. And, well, what should we center weight? Should we do area averaging? They were all figuring out the things that would eventually be commonplace in cameras in the 70s and 80s, but they were designing all this stuff in the late 60s before they came out with it. Now, I told you about the timer here. This is this is the same that was on the Nikon FTNs and stuff like that. You move this arm down here, make sure your film is advanced, and then watch this. You're going to press this, and your mirror locks up. And then your timer moves along, and it gets to the top, and it takes the picture. Like that. That was kind of a slow exposure. You want to do that on a tripod. So that's how the self-timer works. It has all that. It has a depth of field preview button right here. Let's see, I'm going to set this on F16 and see if you can see See if you can see this. There you go, yeah. See the lens stop down? And you hold that in and you can see, it'll be a dark viewfinder, but you can see what is going to be in focus at that set aperture. And you can see I'm opening them up and then closing them down again, or just letting it up. So, depth of field preview button. The one thing that's missing on this camera is it does not give you an ADR, an aperture direct readout. That was only an F model camera, Canon, Nikon's, and that came later in some other ones, but they didn't include that in this because it was a consumer camera. Bottom of this camera, you can see it looks great. No motor drive socket here, no auto winder for this. These were automatic cameras, and you could put a dedicated flash in the hot shoe, but they didn't have winders when they came out with the EL. Let's see, where am I? All right, 10 seconds. All right, oh, how this opens some of these other new features that they got here. This was the first one for Nikon that had this little lever you pull here, right down here, and then you can lift up the rewind knob and you pull it up and the back opens. There you can see you've got a metal electronically controlled shutter. Watch this. There it is. See? So vertically traveling metal blades. This is at a time when everybody was using transverse cloth shutters. So this was very advanced, and Nikon is stuck with the metal shutter all through their lines of SLRs for manual focus cameras, which most of the other companies went with a cloth shutter. It's much cheaper, a little bit quieter, which is a positive maybe, but these are real tough shutters, and they will just go on for lifetimes. So it's just a good feature that you get for a low price on these. I'm going to show you how to do the mirror and the lens. The lens release button is right here, and it looks like the depth of field preview button over here, only just a little bit lower. You see here and here, see how they look the same, but this one's low. All right, so you press the lens release and you twist your lens, and off it comes. Set that aside. Now you can see inside of there, and I'm going to do a couple things. First, I'm going to show you watch this little thing here. See it move? That's what works the depth of field arm on the lens. You press that down and you press this little thing up, and see if we can see this mirror do this. I don't know if you can see it. Did you see it? The mirror is locked up, so you can see the back there. I'll bring it down again. It's hard to tell on the view on this camera whether it's showing up, but I think it's showing up. I think you can see that. Mirror is locked up. And down underneath here, there it is. You pop up a little door, and it shows you where the battery goes. The mirror has to be locked up, and then you can open up the little door that shows the battery compartment. Oh, there we go. You can see the battery. It's got a little, looks like a cut in half AA or AAA Duracell battery in there. It's 6.2 volts, and it works especially for that camera. And then you just fold this door back down, and then you can put the mirror down. And we got the mirror showing up there. All right, then I put this at F16, line it up, and you got to get this indexing pin into the saddle where it's supposed to be, so that that's going to work. You can see that right here. And then you twist it back into position, and you twist them back and forth to re-index the camera for what lens you're using, and you're all set to go. Now, let me tell you one other thing about this. This is kind of an unusual feature a lot of people don't know about. When Nikon was designing this camera, they did not have any much experience with electronically controlled shutters. Everything they had done was mechanically controlled, clockworks inside of a camera, for how long your shutter opened and how quickly it closed, and how the curtains were moved and transported back and forth and reset. But they didn't do that with electronics, so they had to kind of redo it, and they came up with the rheostats and controls that companies were doing to make automatic exposure cameras and to control things. And everybody was kind of, except for Canon, was really doing the aperture priority, where you set the f-stop on the camera to what you want, and the camera selects the shutter speed. Well, your shutter speed dial here looks like this, but at the time that they did this, all Nikons had them down here around the collar around the lens mount, but Nikon moved it up here, which on that S2 that I showed you at the beginning of the video from 1954, they had the shutter speed dial up here, just like this, only it was two levels. They had the fast shutter speeds on top, and below it they had another separate one you controlled on the side, which handled your slow shutter speeds. So this is really advanced when they came up with this idea of putting all the shutter speeds on one dial. And this was a new thing instead of wrapping it around the lens mount. So Nikon did this, and of course it has to have, I hope you can see this, there's an A in green right over here, and that's for automatic, and then there's the shutter speeds for setting in manual shutter. In the middle is a little red button. Whatever you do, don't touch it. 007. No, this is the release, so you can press the little red button, and then you can move to your mechanical shutter speeds. And we have 1/1000th, 500, 250, 125, 60, 30th, 15th, 8th, 4th, and half. That's what I'm, half. And then it goes from white shutter speeds to red shutter speeds, 1 second. Listen to this. I want to show you what I was talking about here. 1 second shutter speed. It's set on manual 1 second, 1/1000th, and that's it. Now let's set it to 2. So this will be a 2 second shutter. 1/1000th, 2/1000th. Okay. Then it has the number 4. So this will be a 4 second shutter. 1/1000th, 2/1000th, 3/1000th, 4/1000th. Like, saying pretty good timing. Now we run out of shutter speeds, but Nikon originally was designing the camera to go to 8 seconds. Well, what happens when you look here, I think you can see this, is it says 4, then there's a big space, then it says B, where you lock into the B setting. So there's a space there where they could have had the number 8. Let's try it. So there we are. I'm in halfway between 4 and B, bulb exposure. 1/1000th, 2/1000th, 3/1000th, 4/1000th, 5/1000th, 6/1000th, 7/1000th, 8/1000th. Ooh. Huh, how about that? They didn't put the 8 up there, but the rheostat on it actually does go to 8 seconds. So that's one of the things that most people don't know that it's there or why it's there, but now you watch this video and stayed on this far, so you know that it can do it and how it works and why it does it. So if you had one of these, you could say, oh yeah, I was doing an 8-second exposure. You can't do an 8-second exposure on an EL. Sure you can. It doesn't have an 8 on it. It has a space on it for the 8. They just didn't put it in. All right, so that's a good little trick you can learn about what you can do with a Nikomat EL. The rest of the story is just winds up pretty quickly. In 1976, they added an auto winder mount connection on the bottom of these mount of the EL Nikomats, and so you had a ELW instead of just an EL. And then 1 year later, 1977, Nikon decided they needed to. That's when, in 77 was when they went to all auto indexing. You see how this has the saddle here, and it just has the stirrup in the middle of it and nothing else? When they changed over to auto indexing, this pin was now going on the side of the lens, inside the lens mount, and these little stirrups here had holes in either side of them to show it was an auto-indexing lens. They kept these for the prong for the older cameras to be able to use auto-indexing lenses, but you can't use these old lenses on the auto-indexing Nikons unless they have the little button you press where you can fold up that connection pin that goes onto that gives the indexing on the lens itself to the camera that was replaced. You have to have that. These old lenses, well, you got to send them to the shop and have them cut a groove in it so that it can go on the newer cameras, which have their auto-indexing mount over here on the outside. So here we have really nice camera. 1977, EL2 replaced the ELW, which took the auto winder and had auto-indexing. But if you like some of these old classic lenses with this great glass that they had in it, you can do some really amazing things. You can get a camera like this for a really reasonable price. And it says Nikomat on it, but it is every bit a Nikon. That's what they were. It was just a trick to say, oh, here's why you can save $200, buy this one. But it's basically the same camera. So these are fine cameras. I'm putting this one up in my store. I'm going to sell it for $99 plus $15 shipping. And if you want to get one of these, and you know all the tricks on this now, it comes with this really nice Nikkor 50mm f1.2, f2, not f1.2. Not one of those. I don't have one of those. But this is a really great film camera. It can do auto and manual, and you can do a whole lot of real old-time classic photography with a Nikomat EL like this. Yeah, my store, I actually put the link down there, but my store is Mr. Gibson Guy 335 on eBay, and you can find different stuff that I have from my other camera stuff that I have up for sale now. Check back with me there. All right, I hope you found this a useful video. Taught you more about the EL probably than you knew. Hope it was something that was useful for you and that you enjoyed it. Tune back in again. I got plenty of other videos coming. Until next time, this is Mr. Gibson Guy, and I'm out of here.